make sure you subscribe to the Button Mappers, and we'll see you next. I got you. Second fake out.
Added to the
Oh,
roll.
oh. Hey everybody, welcome to my review slash impressions of a game that came out yesterday at the time of recording this. It is no secret that I am a huge Resident Evil fan. So I'm here to talk about the Resident Evil 4 remake that just came out. I started playing it at midnight as soon as the game, like my pre-order on my Xbox Series S, unlocked, and I could start playing. And I've played about 6 hours. I do want to talk a little bit before I talk about the game itself, just about how important Resident Evil 4 was for me. It was a game that I played. I was like 14. I had gotten a Nintendo Wii. I was getting more into violent games at that point in my life, and getting Resident Evil 4 on the Wii was very important to me, and it really opened me up to the Resident Evil franchise. After playing that game, I went back and experienced the other titles. So whenever a remake was announced, I was a little terrified because they've been doing pretty good recently with like 7 and 8, and then like the 2 and 3 remakes. But the 2 and 3 remakes, they're taking like the classic tank-based games on the PS1 and putting them into like more of Resident Evil 4 style game. This is taking Resident Evil 4 and putting it more into a Resident Evil 4 updated style game, which is it can go either way, and that's like scenario. It sounds like it's purposeless almost. But I'm here to talk about my thoughts. So, the original Resident Evil 4 was a very interesting game because it was one of the first Resident Evil games to really mix like its classic horror and tense atmosphere with more of an action focused gameplay. And 4 remake keeps to the core of what made the original Resident Evil 4 fun, while also throwing in surprises for fans. And it feels like while I'm playing it so far, it's felt oddly familiar and new, which is a very strange feeling, but I've really been enjoying it. Resident Evil 4, if you don't know what it's about Leon S. Kennedy from Resident Evil 2. He has to go to a country. I forgot what if it has a name. It's a Spanish country. And he has to go rescue the president's daughter that's been kidnapped. When you arrive, you find out there's villagers there that have been infected by this Las Plagas virus, and they're trying to fucking kill you. So you're trying to get the president's daughter and get the hell out of Dodge. Um, Classic over the shoulder gameplay really revolutionized third person shooting, and this remake improves upon the improvements that they had in that game by adding things like you can finally move while you aim, which is a godsend because the original game you could not move. So that's been really nice. New gameplay improvements like the upgraded inventory system. You still have the case, but there's other things you can do in terms of upgrading weapons and accessories. The game looks fantastic. I have more to say about that in a second, though. And it's just been like the production value and stuff all around has been great. They've taken areas from the original game that I know so well. Like so far, I've played up to chapter 7, which is when you first get into the castle. Which, if you played the game before, it's like 45% of the way in, I would say. So like I've played all through the entire opening village area. They simultaneously make the area open while also having you proceed in the same ways that you would have in the more linear original game. Um, so it's very cool how they were able to keep the spirit while also keeping it open like the more recent games have been. Um, Downside I found is that I'm playing on the Xbox Series S, and as of well, I guess yesterday or today, it's not optimized all too well. There's been some graphical pop in with this version. I use when you start playing, I don't know how to switch it between. I was looking at the settings. When you start playing, you get to choose between performance or frame rate mode. I chose performance mode, and I've noticed a lot of textures popping in during the game, which is a little distracting. Hopefully that gets patched. I did look at like the Digital Foundry video to see how it compared to the other versions, and apparently it's not as much of an issue on like the PS5 and Xbox Series X, but I guess Series S and Xbox One and PS4 players beware. Right now, there's times where it can look a little ugly, but it doesn't affect the playability of the game. It's just textures pop in out of nowhere at points. So hopefully they get that patched. I've been having a great time with it. I fucking love it. and I'm probably gonna play more today after we get done recording stuff.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I've heard good things about the remake of RE4. Like my friend, he stayed up for like 10 hours playing it, so that's I guess a testament to how good it is. He's a big
Yeah,
RE fan.
I've put in about 6 hours so far total. And that was just yesterday.
Yeah, I like the original RE4, but I don't know, maybe once it lowers down in price, I'll give it a try because it looks like it has a lot of quality of life improvements and
Mm.
extra goodies to play with.
I think I may have said this before about Resident Evil, but it's almost like uh, there's some games like series that are more they have like phases, and you can tell like how
Mhm.
old people are based on which favorite theirs is. Like with Final Fantasy, like there's like usually 6, and then 7, and then maybe 10. Like those three, you can kind of tell what age or what part they came into it. With Resident Evil, for me, it's 2 and 4. Because when I was
Yeah.
like kid, like 2 was the big one. So to me, Resident Evil 2 will always be the like the highlight of the series. But I always know that people are a little bit younger when they're like 4 was the big one for me, and I'm like, oh, that makes sense because I mean, that's just the game that came out at that time. So it's always fun to see that like people's thoughts, and I haven't played either, quite honestly. So I don't have a personal thing in that. And the reason that I haven't played either of them is because I assume that we're going to be doing one or the other on this channel at some point. So
It's true.
I have 2 ready to go. I was like waiting for us to be like, we're doing Resident Evil 2. So, and this would be a great one to play as well as Resident Evil 4. So I'm pretty excited for those. But do you see any reason to continue playing the original versus the new one?
This one I think tones down the goofiness. The original game was it's sort of an anomaly. It sounds like a game that shouldn't work because it's equal parts like tense horror and goofy action, and it sounds like those wouldn't mesh well, but they somehow do, and they never managed to capture that again. With like four, 5 and 6 never managed to ever capture what 4 did. So I think they wanted to make this remake more in line with the current era of Resident Evil, where they've gone back to horror. So it is a little more subdued on the goofy nature. So I think that's a good reason to get into it if you want like a more serious take on the story and the characters. They do keep some of the goofier lines, which I'm happy about. Like whenever you first clear the opening village, and like this bell rings and like all the villagers shamble off, and Leon goes, "Where's everybody going? Bingo!" Like that's one of the funniest lines in the first game, and they
Mhm.
kept it. He doesn't deliver it quite the same, but they kept the line, and I was like, "Oh, that's so cool that like they're still gonna pay homage to the old game, but without, trying to make the game as over the top as it used to be."
Can you still German suplex people?
You can melee. I've done kicks and stuff. I haven't gotten that yet though.
Okay, that's
Um,
an upgrade for
but
later.
but but
Mm.
you can do a lot more combat like with your knives. So you can do a lot more like stealth and stuff now, which has been cool.
Oh, cool.
But no suplexes so far.
I only want a
Oh,
suplex. That's the only way I want to take down zombies.
I think it's gonna lose some points if there's no suplex. My personal score.
There's a section of the internet that is just grossly policing the words remake, remaster, I guess port. The point where it's impossible to even talk about it with the 3 in the same sentence. But I'm gonna ask this question anyway. Because fuck them. Is this more of a remake or a remaster in your eyes?
Remakes ground up. They didn't use the original game as the basis, like for
Mhm.
programming. That's a whole new game.
I guess
They
what
just
I mean by that though is not like was it redone from the ground up? Do you feel that more of the game itself was remade, or do you feel like it was primarily just kept intact?
I feel like it was remade and they toy with you at points. I'm going to spoil a couple things. So if you are, listener, if you do want to play the game authentically, I went into it blind. So I advise you to also go into it blind. But I'm going to talk about this for a second. There's a few points, and like in the original game, when you first get into the village, you can rescue a dog. It's a dog that's from another Capcom game, The Haunting Ground. You can rescue this dog from a bear trap, and then later on in a boss fight, he comes back and helps you. So when I got to that same point and I found the bear trap, the dog that was supposed to be in the bear trap that I saved was dead. So they knew I was going to be looking for this dog. And then later on, there's a different dog in another bear trap. So they're toying with me, like, no, you can still save the dog. We just wanted to fuck with you. Or like, and there's a cutscene near the beginning of the game in the original version where you save one of the other characters, Louise. He's like in like a wardrobe, but he's knocking, and you can go through this house and hear him knocking on the wood of the wardrobe. Well, I'm going through the same house, and I hear the knocking. I'm about to save Louise, but when I get into that room, it's not him. There's a villager knocking against the floor like a hatch on the ground. And again, it's like, oh, you thought it was going to be that, but it's not this time. So yeah, it's more of a remake where they're also trying to toy with you a little bit for like super fans who have played the original version, which has been very fun for me because I'm like, I know what's going to happen next, and then sometimes I don't.
It's cool.
Yeah.
So so far though, it's been great. Like I said, I just hope they patch the Xbox Series S version at least, because that's the one that I've played, to make it more optimized for that console. Because it's clearly, the priority was clearly PS5, Xbox Series X first, and then they probably scaled it, tried to scale it down for the other consoles because it's like releasing across the Series S and last gen consoles.
Do you? This isn't necessarily a remake specific question, but as a Resident Evil fan, do you prefer this, or do you prefer the tank controls, or do you now prefer first person shooter?
Ooh, that's tough. Because we're like in a weird era now where they have like both, they have the first person games with 7 and 8, and then they have like the remakes that are more of the over the shoulder style. I would say of the styles, of all the styles, I would probably pick over the shoulder. I think it works best, and like especially with like the remake of 2 and stuff, you can see they can still implement the ideas of the tank games without hindering your controls.
Yeah.
It because it can be a little jarring to go back and play those. We did the Resident Evil 1 map out a while back. But yeah, I would say probably the over the shoulder is probably my preferred gameplay style.
I gotta ask one for Violence Month. What is the most violent moment that you have had or are looking forward to in this game?
That I've had or looking. That's because it's Resident Evil 4. You're shooting villagers, their heads are popping off, things are flying out, creatures are flying out of their necks and stuff, and you're fighting bosses. Probably, I fought the first big boss. There's a few smaller bosses throughout the village, but the first big boss, with the guy named Mendez, the big buffy dude with a beard, and then halfway through the boss fight. Well, first part of the boss fight, his like torso and legs separate. It was like this big scorpion monster type thing comes out, and he's like all like shambling at you. And then when you shoot him like a few times, his legs fall off, and then he grows like these other like weird, I don't know what to call them, like weird tentacle things out of his back, and then he's like hanging on the ceiling of this like burning down house fighting you, and he's like throwing shit at you, and he's like just like torso up at that point, and it's so gross looking. So that's probably the most violent it's gotten, but I know that it's going to get more violent. I'm very excited to see the regenerators that are towards the end of the game, because they are some of the scariest Resident Evil monsters. In the original version, the regenerators were these monsters that if you didn't have which the game doesn't tell you, if you didn't have a red like a heat scope for your rifle, you don't know how to kill them, because each time their weak spot changes on their body, and if you just shoot them randomly, their limbs will regenerate and shit. So they're very terrifying. So I'm looking forward to see how they handled that this time, because I always hated fighting those guys in the original version.
Yeah.
Uh, There you go. Resident Evil 4 remake. Coming from somebody who never skips a Resident Evil game, It's good. It's really good.
Hey y'all, don't forget to subscribe to them button mappers.